Okay, deep breath, everybody. Deep breath, deep breath, deep breath. Deep breath, deep breath. Okay, so let's go a little bit popcorn style. How many people do you want in your organization or in your movement?
11 million.
She gets a chocolate. Good answer. What else? Yes? I'm sorry, couldn't hear you. 3 million. Okay. What else?
1.2 million.
How many?
1.2 million.
1.2 million. That's very exact, man.
10%.
You're gonna reject people.
I mean, 10%.
Yeah. And then
What else?
just like
Others,
rule of
others. I
10.
want to hear from the
We
networks.
need
What
10
about
people.
Dream the Foundation United with Dream?
11 mil.
You want to get 11 million? Yes, Kevin?
5% of the undocumented youth population, so that's 100,000.
That's good. Oh, wow. That's good. That's really good. I think that's all. Dan?
Could you maybe define in your organization a little bit more?
That's good. So, we're going to address that in a second. Right? It depends in the ladder, right?
Yeah, that's what like where, what do you mean by?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get 100,000 people in a petition.
Right.
I guess more mean, if you were in an organization, how many people that would go through training that you would have?
Oh,
So for them to have 100,000, they gotta get 100,000 people through training.
oh wow.
You know, that doesn't mean that Kevin technically has to train 100,000 people.
You can do it, Kevin, I believe.
I'm sure you can, Kevin. So let's talk about the dynamics of mass training. Boom. We already talked about the ladder, right? Okay. So the ladder. First of all, we really have to capture the information in 1 and 2. I just want to put this out there. It sounds maybe a little bit over simple here. But sometimes we really have to figure out how to capture the names of the participants of actions, or how to get people from really get their emails and all that information. And the online stuff does a lot of that for the emails, right? But how many of us, and actually actions, are carrying clip notes and actually collecting names? Not everybody. It's a practice that I feel we need to bring back. Well,
I just want to say, if I were to talking to the young organizer Paul, I can't tell you how much frustration and anger and pain has caused me that I did not have a clipboard when I needed one. Okay, I know that sounds crazy, but there's so many actions where we mobilize people and we did not get their information, including 1.2 million people, and it wouldn't be me that signed up everybody, but I'm just saying we had no strategy, and these are some of the best structure-based organizers that I've ever met, helped plan this thing, and we didn't have a strategy to just get people's emails.
I have a comment.
yes.
So, for CBC, and we're like a small nonprofit and stuff, but we're actually very good at gathering like all these things on paper. So we have like a whole bunch of lists, with a whole bunch of names, but nobody will take the time to actually put that in any kind of database. Like, that's really boring, and none of us even want to touch it. We just look at it and it's like
That's what interns are.
yeah, but even like then we already want to engage them with like doing actions. Like, we have no system of nothing like that.
So that needs to be created. Does this make sense? Now, can that be created in a way that this is centralized and you have a culture that people actually input data back? It can be, but people have to be trained on it.
Yes.
Yes, data. Okay. Third point, which we already talked about the online tools. We must consistently invite people as they forget about the small actions that they took online. We gotta invite them to training, invite them to training, invite them to training. And this is the thing to me on training. So, we brought you all to this training for a reason. Because now you know that we gotta expand this, so we're looking for who of you are interested in doing more training. Because this training cannot grow just based on the time that Paul and I have. Is that correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
So when you're doing training, you're looking for more trainers. You're looking for who's really understanding the content, who's really speaking well and clearly. You're really on recruitment mode for more trainers. Okay? So that's the first dynamic of mass training. Just very basic stuff. Let's keep going. This is the thing. Now it depends when you do mass training. What happens if you do not have momentum? Do you have a different strategy that if you do have momentum for mass training? We talked about this before, right? So what happens if you do not have momentum? If you do not have momentum, you do what people in the structured tradition do very well, which is that you go to a town, you set up one-on-one meetings, you try to get a group of top 5 to 7 leaders. You get them to a first team meeting, which in many organizing groups will be like setting up a committee or something like that. But in normal organizing structure, those 5 to 7 people say, okay, let's do something together. Actually, if you're trying to do mass training, the commitment would then for them to not agree, for them to actually agree that they want to do a training. So a lot of the networking United We Dream was me flying somewhere, trying to find leaders, trying to convince them that they needed to come together, form a team, and then trying to convince them that they needed to do a training for 30 to 50 people based on the people they mobilize. Now, why do we do this effort? Because most people that we find new actually do not have a following. And in the regular structured tradition, we look for people with followers. Is that true or not?
Yes.
But do most people have followers?
No.
No. So it's like a kind of an oxymoron, right? You're just going for like the 1% of the group, right? So the role is pretty much you say, look, you all have leadership capabilities. Let's do a training so that you can have a following. So you will train your following that time. Is this making some sense? That's what happens when you don't have momentum. Now what happens? If you're a new leader and you're excited and you bring 30 to 50 people, then you start getting really excited. Your level of commitment increases because now you made a public commitment to those people, yes or no?
Yes.
But also people, because we are giving them the training, the process, now they understand how to do the training. And they can do more. This is what you do when you have no momentum. Paul, any thoughts on this one?
So I hate to admit this, but in Serbia, you know, they like studied all these revolutionary movements to try to create their DNA. And I asked them, how did you figure out all this stuff about mass training? You know what they said? Amway. Pyramid schemes. They said the problem about pyramid schemes is that you're selling, they have a meta-narrative, they have a grand strategy, they have a product, and we realize that our product is the revolution, but the thing is about what makes pyramid schemes cons is that it's actually selling people on a false vision of what they're going to get. And people are profiting off of that. We're like, we don't profit off of it. This isn't a pyramid scheme because we don't control it from the top and we don't profit from it. But a lot of the process of training is that you train people, and then those people train people, and then those people train people, and it's a viral cycle. So they call it act, recruit, train, act, recruit, train. And they developed that through a lot. They studied multi-level marketing. But this is the same thing that happened in the Obama campaign, and it's the same thing that Carlos is sort of talking about.
Yes, sir.
So wait, that team meeting is you training them in how to do the training?
No, it's getting commitment that we need to do a training.
Okay.
And then what I would spend is the time from here to here preparing them in how to do the training.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Yes. We'll come back to it. Yes, sir.
Isn't it a pyramid scheme?
Well, there's a pyramid.
The double chain.
So
Yes, sir.
are these people, these 5 to 7 leaders then, you don't have a separate training of trainers, like the whole module that you do? Or is like these people, because I'm really anxious about bad trainers, because bad trainers just make more bad trainers, which make bad trainers, right? So it makes me nervous just to think of like preparing these 5 to 7 leaders and thinking that they're gonna be at the necessary caliber.
So that involves a process in the structural tradition that's called selection. Because this is actually on your control. You're selecting who those 5 to 7 people are. So you gotta really look for who you're gonna pick. Now, being a good trainer is different than being a good leader. I wanna make that distinction. Because to me, for example, leaders that have the care of the community on their hands and wanna do better, that's great. Now, for them to become good trainers, it's a whole other deal. But that actually involves a skill. Most people can train. The problem is that they don't actually have a good training about how to be trainers. They don't have a good process of being coach. Are you following me on this? But also, this is the biggest thing about this that I would say, is that most people don't actually have systematized training. So the information you're giving them, so this is, you have to spend a lot of time making sure the training is super simple for them. Because if it's complex, they're not gonna get it. Not in that time frame.
And they're not gonna be able to share it with other
That
people.
is correct. So, and that's the reason, so what I'm showing you is this is once you're already ready to give training. So you gotta go through the process of making your training modules, making fun graphics, shareable PowerPoints, trainer notes, so that people can just repeat the training.
But I just want to say that is an art form. Systematization is an art form. And when we call systemization, we're talking it within the culture of mass training. And what that means is you're not just simplifying it so that everyone understands it. You're simplifying it so that everyone can understand it and the trainer can train it and the trainer can train other people to be trainers. Does that make sense? So, and that process is really an art form to figure out how to do systemization, to get it into, and this is why the core is the one that generally does the systemization, because it's a very complex art form. Like Marshall Gantz spent how long doing the
He's been at
systematization?
least 10 years.
10 years systematizing the training, the mass initiation training that Obama used, okay? And I think if you talk to Sam, you'll realize that she has an incredible art of how to do systematized training. Like, I think that's Sam's specialty. She has a lot of skills on that.
And it's really hard, and like, it still doesn't work half the time, like, testing is really important, like, it's really, really hard, and, yeah, I do it a lot, and it's still really hard.
So we're not expecting that those people are gonna develop trainings. The core is gonna develop the trainings, and they need to be super well systematized before you can expect those people to do the training.
We have some comments, Muffin and Stefan.
Yeah, I think also the stories, I don't think there are bad trainers, I think there are people that are trained bad or unprepared. So like, I remember before I met Carlos, like, I hate public speaking, like, put me in front of 10 people and I would get red and I would get frustrated, but I got the skills and like, just doing it over and over again, then like, I'm able to now be in a room full of people and be able to train, so, so for us to check ourselves to not make stories, when we have like new leaders, like they might be shy or they might stutter a lot, but they can really develop into amazing trainers.
I just have a question of process.
Yes.
If you are struggling with your movement DNA, it seems like maybe you shouldn't be training, but I don't think that's what you're saying. But then I'm just kind of wondering how you go about it if you're still,
Are you struggling with every single part of your DNA?
no, I wouldn't say that.
So there's probably some parts you can't do training.
Okay.
So the organization where I work, we follow this model for our community work, but we also take it to another level to help connect other organizations and entities that work on similar but like different issues, so that when they have an opportunity to engage in the kind of work that we do, they're trained, and we call that our anchor strategy. Because we work nationally, so we'll go in and we'll train like an organization to do the kind of work that we do so that they can train the community trainers, and then what we end up having are all of these like key points, like distribution points that go outward, which is really helpful for building movements, and it's great because then they can carry some of the responsibility for providing resources to the community folks that are training and then going out and training, so that it's not all back on us. And I think it's a really useful model for organizations that are small, that want to connect with other small organizations to have a bigger impact.
Amen. Yes, I love training. So you're like,
I do a lot of training, so I'm like a super training. I'm like super into training, I love it.
I'll send you that training magazine subscription so you can share it out. Do you read the article?
Do a training at the training conference.
Yes. Super
Super
meta.
meta
Inception.
about it.
Am I about a training? Okay. No. We got some other comments here. Do we have a comment here? No. Okay, good. Let's continue. We'll have more. Okay. So what do you do if you have momentum? Paul and I had a big fight over this. Huge fight. Monumental fight about this. And I just want to say I kind of won. Well, maybe not. We compromise. But through a lot of conversations, what I notice is that most of the times a movement does not have the training capacity. Most of the times. Most people didn't come to this training or knew about it or actually have the training capability. And what I notice is that the best way to train in momentum is just to freaking schedule it. this is what I would say this. There's because, look, is there a culture of protest in the movement, yes or no? Do people even question that they can protest? No, right? But because there's not a culture of training, people question it all the time. So for example, our brother Kai and others at 99 Rise in California have started a march, I don't know for how many days they've been going already, right? All throughout California, right? And I was talking to them on the phone the other day because they're gonna hopefully generate some momentum through that, and they were saying, well, what is about our training program? And they just come and they talk to me, hey Carlos, blah, 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 hey, blah, blah, blah. And they tell me, well, we wanna develop more training and stuff, and I was like, that's great, well, let's figure out how many people you wanna train, we'll talk about it. And then they tell me a story. They say, well, we don't know we have the capacity. And I was like, oh, you don't have the capacity. Well, I said, how important is training for you? And they were like, well, it's important because we need to absorb, they know this stuff, right? It's important to us. Well, how important? And they said, well, but we don't have the capacity. I was like, is that true? We're gonna learn orientation on this one. And they said, well, I don't know. I said, look, about 2 months ago, you said, we're gonna march across California. How many people did you have committed? Just me. Now you have all these people, you're marching in the middle. How much capacity did you build because you had a deadline? All this capacity. So this is what I'm trying to say around this story, because you see, a culture is to have a positive story about a practice. Right? So having that, because if you don't have the culture, then you just have to schedule it. For example, let's say that you get a big trigger event, right? Have all these people coming in. Just tell them the training is on Saturday, even if you got 3 days. Just schedule it. Why? It's better for people at least to know the basic 3 things than not to know anything at all.
And you're gonna lose them if you don't.
Tell them, just it's on Saturday, it's on Friday. Where is it? It's in, just give us your email, we'll tell it to you at 6 p.m. So when you have momentum, just schedule it. That's it. Then you will figure out the capacity you need to do whatever level of training you can at that time. But some training is better than no training. Yeah.
I really appreciate you saying there's a difference between a leader and a trainer. But I also just have a question about just in my own work where, like the previous slide, it basically shows, right, you go out and you schedule these one-on-ones, you get your top 5 to 7 leaders, and at that point, I think that's where we are right now, where we're trying to incorporate to have our leaders do the training. I guess a question that I have, especially in Boston, where most of the youth groups that we work with already have a training curriculum on whatever it is that they're working on. And so, one, I always hear this, like, you know, people would say, oh, we just don't have the capacity, or it's just too much. So that's one phase. And then there's like this other phase where it becomes transactional. Where they're like, if you do a training for us, we can do a training for you. So I guess I'm wondering, how do you, when you get to that middle stage, how do you get your leaders to care enough that the capacity isn't a question, right? That they are able to train other leaders, and you don't, I don't know if I'm framing that correctly, but how do you get them to care about what you're doing opposed to like what they're getting paid to do?
That depends on your movement DNA.
Yeah.
And that depends on your culture. Because for me, this was the next step. And they will tell me, can we do something else? No. This is the next step. So it really depends. Some of you already have committees, is that true or not? So sometimes you have to win the battle of training. The battle of making sure they understand why training is good. That means that we have to generate training and experiences where you are training. Now let me ask you something, Carlos. How many trainings are you doing a month?
In a month, I don't know, anywhere between like 5 and 7.
And how many people are coming through your training?
Per training?
Yes.
On an average, 7 to 10.
Okay. And how much of that do you think there's another leader or another 2 leaders that, do you do trainings with your other leaders? Do they become co-trainers with you? Are you coaching?
No, and so that's what we want to get to. It's just, I think we've always questioned ourselves to say,
Who
like, how do
has
we,
questioned yourself?
We've always
Okay.
questioned ourselves. But it,
No,
yeah,
this is important.
Yeah.
Because you see, thank you so much for sharing. I just want to address that. We are the ones that question the training. Most of the leaders, they